Hello and welcome back to Actual English, everyone. I'm Jennifer Clyde. It's time for lesson 218, and today's topic is DMZ. Now, DMZ stands for Demilitarized Zone. I'm sure that you are aware of what the DMZ is. I do understand that Korean citizens are not allowed into the area, but foreign visitors are. I have been to the DMZ once, a very, very long time ago. I do remember feeling very nervous when walking into that building, but it was an interesting experience for me and my friends that went with me at the time. This was probably about 15 years ago, or even before that. Now, when the Korean War began, of course, the North Korean People's Army, they poured across the 38th parallel. And of course, ever since, Korea or the Korean Peninsula has been divided roughly in half across the 38th parallel. So there is a DMZ, which we call a buffer zone between the North and South Koreas. So we'll be talking about the DMZ specifically today. Let's find out what the conversation is about, okay? What details they mention in the conversation. So let's begin with actual talk.
Kelly, one of the most unique places that I've been to in Korea is the demilitarized zone, the DMZ. Have you ever been?
I have once, a few years ago, yes.
What did you think?
Well, I was really excited going because, I lived here for quite a while, and it's a place that very few people get a chance to go to and get a chance to see.
Yeah.
And I felt that that was really the main significance of going to it. Here you are in Korea, of course, you have to see this incredibly historically relevant place.
Yeah.
But I have to say, aside from it having a beautiful view, there wasn't really much there. There were souvenirs, some interesting artifacts of alcohol, food products from North Korea, but I didn't feel very, it still felt very isolated over there, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, when I went to Panmunjom, where you can literally, technically set foot in North Korea in that building, in the blue building. It's really surreal though, because there are Korean guards here and then literally just a few meters away over there, North Korean guards staring back at you. And I felt like I was walking on eggshells because before you go into that building, they tell you, don't mess about, don't make any signs to the other side or anything.
Of course not.
So I was like, I have to be on my best behavior. I was a bit nervous, but it was something to tell the grandchildren,
Oh, certainly. If I had not gone, I'd be disappointed in myself. I did look over and I did try and imagine what would it be like to live over there. I wonder what those people are doing. I'm glad that I went. I hope one day I can we end up in a situation where I can take a trip over to North Korea. I hope we see that day.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that. It is a very poignant, moving place, and I think everyone should try and get there at least once.
I agree.
So we know that Peter has been to the DMZ, and Peter and Kelly talk about how it is a very important experience for foreigners. Take the advantage. You are allowed to go tour the DMZ, so do that whenever you get the chance. Okay, let's find out in detail what they talked about then. Here we go. Peter began by saying, Kelly, one of the most unique places that I have been to in Korea is the demilitarized zone, the DMZ in other words, he says. Have you ever been? Meaning, have you ever been there? Now let's take a look at this word, demilitarize or demilitarized. We're saying that it is demilitarized. DE in many cases means minus, okay? There's dehydration, for example. If you say, I am dehydrated, it means that you need water, okay? So in this case, demilitarized, so we're talking about an area or a zone that is stripped or removed of all military forces or even weapons, okay? So DMZ simply put. Anyhow, once again, the question is, have you ever been? And Kelly said, I have once. When? A few years ago. I've lived here for quite a while, and it's a place that very few people get a chance to go to and see. So she's saying that she's been here quite a while. quite a while means for some time, and it is a place. The DMZ is a place that very few people get a chance to go to and see. Here, not a, but it's very few. A very few and very few. There is a difference. In this case, she's saying not many people get the chance to go and actually see for themselves. Okay? And of course, Peter agrees. He says, sure, yeah. Callie, once again, you have to see this incredibly historically relevant place. Relevant can mean important, something of importance, something that is given value, something that is given meaning, for example. But in most cases, if you say relevant, you're saying that it relates to the subject you are talking about at that moment, at that point, for example. That's why the opposite would be irrelevant, which means having nothing to do with the subject you are talking about. But I have to say, aside from it, having a beautiful view, there wasn't really much there. There wasn't much there. What is she trying to say? Okay, she's saying aside from something, aside from it having a beautiful view, she's saying, well, it had a beautiful view, but that was about it. There was nothing more. That was about it, just a beautiful view, and that was almost it. There wasn't really much there. There were souvenirs, some interesting artifacts. So, souvenir, you all know what it means. We're talking about small things perhaps, gifts that we often buy for friends and family, especially when we visit a foreign country. Now, you can buy gifts or little tiny things, could be souvenirs that remind you of a place that you've been to, okay? Or it can remind you of a certain situation as well. Those are what we call souvenirs. Souvenirs and some artifacts. Artifacts are usually something that is man-made, so a man-made object. It can be from a long, long time ago, but usually artifacts we often call objects that are man-made, which are of great value. Okay, so she's saying there's a beautiful view, maybe some souvenirs and some artifacts, and then, moving on, she says they have alcohol, food products from North Korea. And that's about it. But, well, it still felt very isolated over there. So up until this point, she's talking about what you can see at the DMZ. You can experience this and that. You can find or discover this and that, okay? And we're done talking about that. And then she talks about how it feels to be there, okay? She says it still felt, how she felt at the time, it still felt very isolated there. Isolated means alone, separated from everything else, separated from everybody else, alone, for example, okay, isolated. Maybe a similar word that has a similar meaning, a word that has a similar meaning would be lonely. Yeah, isolated, just separated from everything else, okay? We'll go over that word later on again. And then Peter says, absolutely. I went to Panmunjom, where you can literally and technically set foot in North Korea. And he says, in that building. Now, to set foot in a place means to go to a place, okay? Imagine, you go to a place, when you enter a place, what do? You step into that place. You're setting foot in that place. So to set foot in a certain place or location would mean to go there, okay? It's really surreal because there are Korean guards here and then literally just a few meters away, over there, North Korean guards staring back at you. So now he's saying that it was really surreal. What is surreal? Let's take away S-U-R. Let's take a look at this word here. R-E-A-L. Real. You know what that means, right? Real, reality. But if you add an S-U-R to real, you're saying that it is almost real. It's dreamlike, okay? So if something is unbelievable, hard to believe, if it almost seems or feels real but it's not, if it's like a dream or if it's dreamlike, you would say that it is, something is surreal. So once again, it's really surreal. Why? Because there are Korean guards here. And then literally just a few meters away, only a few meters away, there are North Korean guards staring back at you, just looking straight at you, okay? And then he says, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. So walk on eggshells is today's idiom as well. We'll be going over this pattern later on. Imagine, okay? Practice imagining or try to guess what these phrases and idioms mean, because in most cases you may be right. So imagine that you're walking on eggshells, shells of eggs. You can crack an egg and set the eggshells on the floor. Imagine stepping on those eggshells. How would you feel? Uncomfortable maybe? Painful even? So if you are walking on eggshells, it means to be very, very careful about what you do or say because you do not want to upset anything or anybody, okay? So you're being very, very careful not to upset anything or anybody. That's walking on eggshells. Kind of feeling nervous, I guess. And then he says, because before you go into that building, they tell you, don't mess about. They also say, don't make any signs to the other side or anything. So they warn you about this. Mess about means what? If you say don't mess about, it means act appropriately, okay? Don't do anything wrong or stupid. Don't mess about means act appropriately. And they even say don't make any signs. Any signs, okay? Facial expressions, any signs with your hands, for example. To who? To the other side or anything. And of course, Kelly says, oh, of course not. You don't want to do that. So I was like, meaning, so I thought to myself, oh, I have to be on my best behavior. And he says, I was a bit nervous. So here we have be on one's best behavior. Now that is another idiomatic expression you can really make use of. Now, to be on your best behavior means to act appropriately and at the same time very polite. This is because in most cases, if you are in a situation, a formal situation or a very important situation, you want to act appropriately. So you're acting or behaving well and very politely. That means to be on your best behavior. As parents, you can tell your children sometimes, say you're going to a very important event and the kids have to be quiet, they shouldn't be running around. You can tell your children, okay, you two or you three or you be on your best behavior. It means behave well. All right, and then he says, but it was something to tell the grandchildren. What does this mean? It was something to tell the grandchildren. This is something you would say in a situation where you experience something so valuable that you want to remember it until the day you die, that you will remember until the day you die. And if it is a story or an experience you want to share with your grandchildren, even later on when you become a grandma or a grandpa, you would say, it's something to tell the grandchildren. You're saying that it is a very, very important experience. Okay, moving on. Now, Kelly says, certainly, if I had not gone, if I hadn't gone, I would be disappointed in myself. I would blame myself. I would be angry at myself for not going. And then she says, I did try to imagine what would it be like to live over there. Over there meaning over on that side, we're talking about North Korea. She imagined, she asked herself, what would it be like to live over there on that side of Korea, in North Korea? And she even asked herself, I wonder what those people, meaning North Koreans, are doing. And then she says, I'm glad that I went. Went to the DMZ, of course, okay? So she's saying, I'm glad that I went to the DMZ. If I hadn't gone, I would have regretted it. I would have been disappointed in myself. And then moving on. Peter says, yeah, it is a very poignant, moving place. Okay, let's take a look at this sentence. He's saying it is a place. It is what place? It is a very poignant place. Poignant means, this could mean that it's painful, okay? Or it really shakes your emotions. It's just a sad thing sometimes. So if you say something is poignant, it's a very touching moment or touching experience or feeling. It can be a sad feeling as well, a painful feeling as well. Something very touching and moving would be described as poignant. And here, moving place. We're not talking about actually the place moving or shaking. We're saying that it is touching. It's a very moving place. Okay? And he says, I think everyone should try and get there at least once in their lifetime. Okay? Not twice, not 10 times, but at least once. He's saying, make the time to go and check out the DMZ. Okay, that about brings us to the end of the conversation. Let's take a listen to it one more time.
Kelly, one of the most unique places that I've been to in Korea is the demilitarized zone, the DMZ. Have you ever been?
I have once, a few years ago, yes.
What did you think?
Well, I was really excited going because, I lived here for quite a while, and it's a place that very few people get a chance to go to and get a chance to see.
Yeah.
And I felt that was really the main significance of going to it. Here you are in Korea. Of course, you have to see this incredibly historically relevant place.
Yeah.
But I have to say, aside from it having a beautiful view, there wasn't really much there. There were souvenirs, some interesting artifacts of alcohol, food products from North Korea, but I didn't feel very, it still felt very isolated over there, of course.
Absolutely. When I went to Panmunjom, where you can literally, technically set foot in North Korea in that building, in the blue building, is really surreal though, because there are Korean guards here and then literally just a few meters away over there, North Korean guards staring back at you. And I felt like I was walking on eggshells because before you go into that building, they tell you, don't mess about, don't make any signs to the other side or anything.
Of course not.
So I was like, I have to be on my best behavior. I was a bit nervous, but it was something to tell the grandchildren,
Oh, certainly. If I had not gone, I'd be disappointed in myself. I did look over and I did try and imagine what would it be like to live over there. I wonder what those people are doing. I'm glad that I went. I hope one day I can we end up in a situation where I can take a trip over to North Korea. I hope we see that day.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that. It is a very poignant, moving place, and I think everyone should try and get there at least once.
I agree.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time for actual expressions. Let's begin with demilitarize, okay? Demilitarize. Stress goes on mil, the second syllable. Let's try this word 3 times together. Demilitarize. Demilitarize. One more time. Demilitarize. There you go. And a synonym would be neutralize. That would be a synonym, but I would say no other word really perfectly fits demilitarize, okay? Demilitarize or demilitarized zone is an area where no weapons or no military forces are allowed. They're actually removed of military forces and weapons, okay? Relevant. Stress goes on the first syllable as you see, and we're talking about something related to or suitable, even significant, as I did mention earlier on. And souvenir, I chose this word just to help you pronounce it correctly. Okay, the stress goes on the last syllable, so it's souvenir. Souvenir. One more time. Souvenir. Good job. Isolated. It means separated. Secluded is a good one, or even detached. Okay, it's not attached, it's detached, which means that it is apart from something, separated from. It's on its own. It's alone. Surreal. Here we go. Surreal. Surreal. And it means dreamlike. What about our final word, poignant? Now, be careful not to say poignant. There is no G sound as you see. It's poignant. 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 stress goes on the first syllable, poignant. And if something stirs your emotions or moves your emotions, you can say that it is poignant, okay? Affecting, painful, heartbreaking, or even sad. Okay, now let's move on to our patterns for today. Walk on eggshells. I did tell you, is it comfortable? No, you're going to feel very uncomfortable and very nervous. An expression that means exactly the same as walk on eggshells would be tread on thin ice. You're walking on thin ice, or you're walking on eggshells, okay? Here we go. Ever since I came home late last night, I've been walking on eggshells with my parents. So, to walk on eggshells once again means to try very hard not to upset someone or something, okay? So you came home late last night, so you've been very careful about how you behave in front of your parents because you don't want to get them mad or angry. Now, set foot in somewhere. This is pretty simple. Set foot in means to visit a place or to go to a place. Korean citizens are not allowed to set foot in the DMZ or the Panmunjom, right? So Korean citizens are not allowed to set foot in the DMZ, step into that area, go to the DMZ. Okay, and then we have one final one, to be on one's best behavior. This means what? To behave well, to be very polite, especially if you're in a very important situation or at a very important event. Here we go. I made sure I was on my best behavior. I made sure I was well behaved and very polite. When? When I met my boyfriend's parents for the first time. Oh, first impressions are very important. So you can say when you met somebody for the first time, you wanted to leave a good impression. And if you specifically want to say that you were very careful about how you acted or what you said, if you want to say that you acted very politely and you behaved very well, you can say that you were on your best behavior. Let's try the sentence together one more time. I made sure I was on my best behavior when I met my boyfriend's parents for the first time. Okay, job well done, everyone. That is a wrap for today's actual expressions.
The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea. It ended about 3 years later in a stalemate, and the division between North and South Korea was restored with the addition of the DMZ. The Korean DMZ is a border barrier along the 38th parallel north, and it's one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world. Also, it pretty much divides North and South Korea in half and pretty much serves as a buffer between the two. It was created as part of the Korean armistice at the end of the war in 1953, but it can be argued that the war never actually ended because a peace treaty was never actually signed between the two, and just a ceasefire was agreed upon.
Okay, we are running out of time, so let's get straight into today's actual story. We had Alexis talking about the DMZ. She's talked about the Korean War and what it's like at the DMZ as well. Let's take a look. The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea. To invade, it means to enter forcefully, especially as an enemy. Okay, so they forcefully invaded, they forcefully entered, okay? They invaded South Korea. The division between North and South Korea was restored with what? The addition of the DMZ. So we're talking about the demilitarized zone. One thing I do want to mention here is, because a lot of people ask me, why is it North and then South Korea? Why is it not South and North Korea? Well, we don't say North and South Korea because North Korea is more important. It is not that, not at all. But usually in English, when we talk about the two countries, especially if they are separated, we usually put them in alphabetical order. So since N comes before S in the alphabet, that's why we say north first and then south. So please do keep that in mind, okay? It's not South and North Korea. You could say that, but normally or commonly people would say North and South. Moving on. The Korean DMZ is a border barrier. It's like a fence along the 38th parallel. We're talking about that line, okay, that boundary. And then it serves as a buffer. You can add zone, a buffer zone between the North and South Koreas. You can say North and South Koreas because we're talking about North Korea and South Korea. A buffer zone is like an area, a zone, an area that is there to protect each country, okay, from their enemies. So we're calling that a buffer zone. Buffer zone. It's like a neutral zone, okay? And I think that brings us to an end to today's actual story. Okay, everyone, take a listen to it one more time.
The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea. It ended about 3 years later in a stalemate, and the division between North and South Korea was restored with the addition of the DMZ. The Korean DMZ is a border barrier along the 38th parallel north, and it's one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world. Also, it pretty much divides North and South Korea in half and pretty much serves as a buffer between the two. It was created as part of the Korean armistice at the end of the war in 1953, but it can be argued that the war never actually ended because a peace treaty was never actually signed between the two, and just a ceasefire was agreed upon.
We learned a lot of phrases and vocab words and idiomatic expressions that you can use when talking about the DMZ. So there were useful idioms you can really practice and make yours. And there were words or phrases such as a buffer or a buffer zone, which is also called a neutral area. You can talk about the 38th parallel. Also mentioned something about how the North Korean People's Army invaded South Korea, and much more. Please do go over our lesson and learn those words and really make use of them the next time you talk about the DMZ. Now, in our next lesson, let's talk about the Bukchon Hanok Village. It's another very popular place among foreign visitors and locals alike. So yeah, look forward to that. In the meantime, come to our homepage, everyone. Come on over to www.ebse.co.kr and look for Actual English with Jennifer. Okay, that is a wrap for today, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.